August 22, 1191. The Levantine coast. 12,000 men are marching to their deaths, and they know it. The column stretches 6 miles from front to rear, a thin ribbon of steel and flesh crawling south between the Mediterranean waves and the killing grounds of the Palestinian highlands. Every man can do the math. 80 miles to Jaffa. Maybe 10 miles per day in this heat. 8 days of exposure. 8 days of being hunted. The sun hasn't peaked yet, but armor is already cooking flesh underneath. Water rations ran low yesterday. Horses are drinking seawater out of desperation, which means they'll be dead by tomorrow. But none of that is the real problem. The real problem is the horizon. Look east, past the infantry screen, past the scattered palms, into the wavering heat distortion, and you'll see them. Dust clouds. Signal fires. The glint of 30,000 spear tips catching morning light. Saladin's army. Watching. Waiting. Choosing the perfect moment to erase these invaders from existence. This is the story of how one man, outnumbered 3-1, his forces exhausted and slowly dying, engineered the most surgically precise cavalry assault in medieval warfare. Not through reckless courage. Not through divine intervention. But through an understanding of human psychology so profound that it turned certain annihilation into legendary victory. The battle lasted 17 minutes. But the strategy began 6 weeks earlier. Let's go back. July 12, 1191. The fortress of Acre. After a siege that lasted 2 years and cost 50,000 lives, Richard finally forced the city's surrender. It gave him control of the northern coast. A deep water port. Supply lines to Europe. But strategically, Acre was meaningless without Jaffa. Jerusalem, the entire reason this crusade exists, sits in the interior mountains. You can't assault it from the north. The terrain is impossible. But from Jaffa in the south? You've got access roads, siege routes, and resupply capacity from the Mediterranean fleet. So Richard needs Jaffa. And there's only one way to get there. March 80 miles down the exposed coastal corridor while Saladin's entire field army shadows your every step, looking for the perfect ambush point. Most commanders would have waited. Built up forces. Secured the route. Richard didn't have time. His army was already fracturing. The French contingent was threatening to leave. Leopold of Austria had already abandoned the crusade after Richard insulted him at Acre. Disease was spreading through the camps. And back in England, Richard's brother John was positioning himself to seize the throne. Richard needed victory fast, or he needed to go home. So he made a calculated gamble. Force march to Jaffa before Saladin could concentrate his forces enough to destroy him. Except Saladin was already concentrated. And he'd been planning this ambush for weeks. Think about it from Saladin's perspective. For 4 years, he's been humiliating crusader armies. After Hattin in 1187, he recaptured Jerusalem, wiped out the Knights Templar and Hospitaller leadership, and reduced the crusader kingdoms to 3 coastal cities. He's the hero of the Islamic world. Untouchable. Then Richard shows up and takes Acre in 6 weeks. Suddenly Saladin looks vulnerable. Suddenly Muslim emirs are questioning whether he's still the right leader. Suddenly he needs a decisive victory to restore his reputation. Richard marching down an exposed coastal road? That's not a military campaign. That's a gift. For 6 days, Saladin doesn't attack. He just haunts them. His horse archers stay just outside crossbow range, close enough to be seen, too far to be killed. Every few hours they ride forward, loose a few volleys of arrows, then scatter before the crusaders can respond. It's not about casualties. It's about psychological pressure. Because here's what this does to a medieval army, it makes every moment terrifying. You're marching in 115-degree heat. Your armor is baking you alive. You haven't slept in 3 days because the Muslim forces set fires on the hills at night, and you don't know if those fires mean an attack is coming or if it's just more psychological torture. Your horse collapsed this morning, and now you're marching on foot carrying 80 pounds of equipment. And every single moment, you know there are 30,000 warriors just beyond visual range, waiting to kill you. Sleep deprivation. Heat exhaustion. Constant low-level fear. Saladin is turning Richard's army into traumatized, exhausted, emotionally fragile targets before the real battle even begins. Richard's response? Draconian discipline. He issues orders. Any knight who breaks formation dies. Any soldier who charges without permission dies. Any man who abandons his position, even to save a fallen comrade, dies. The Templars march at the front. The Hospitallers at the rear. The baggage train stays between the column and the sea, protected by the fleet. And the heavy cavalry, Richard's only offensive weapon, stays locked in the center, untouchable, waiting for the perfect moment. But Saladin is patient. He's fought crusaders for 20 years. He knows their weakness, pride. Crusader knights are trained from childhood to believe that cavalry charges solve everything. That courage means attacking. That retreating or waiting is cowardice. So Saladin increases the pressure. Closer approaches. Louder drums. And he concentrates everything on the Hospitallers at the rear, because they're the most aggressive, the most honor-bound, and the most likely to break. By September 6th, day 15 of the march, the Hospitallers have lost 300 men. Not to battle. To arrows. To heat. To horses collapsing. They've been marching backward for 2 weeks, shields raised, unable to strike back, just absorbing punishment while Richard tells them to wait. And they're done waiting. September 7th, 6 a.m. The Crusader column is 6 miles north of Arsuf, 1 day from safety, when Saladin springs the trap. The entire Ayyubid field army emerges from the forest of Arsuf simultaneously. Not scattered raiding parties. 30,000 warriors in formation. This is every soldier Saladin can field. Every Mamluk cavalry unit. Every Turkish archer corps. Every Bedouin auxiliary force. The message is clear. Today, one army dies. The Crusader column halts. Infantry lock shields on the left flank. Crossbowmen take position behind them. The cavalry remains in the center, motionless, waiting for Richard's order. And Saladin unleashes hell. 15,000 archers advance to 200 yards and fire in volleys. The mathematics are staggering. Approximately 30,000 arrows per minute. The sky darkens. The sound is like hail on a tin roof, except what's hitting isn't ice. It's bodkin points punching through chain mail into organs. Men scream. Horses scream. The wounded can't be evacuated because leaving formation means execution. So they just lie there, bleeding, while the arrows keep coming. Hours pass. The sun climbs. The temperature exceeds 110 degrees. Men inside armor are literally cooking. Some pass out from heatstroke and drown in their own vomit inside their helmets. But Richard's order holds. Do not break formation. By noon, the Hospitallers have been reduced to half strength. Their Grand Master, Garnier de Nablus, sends a messenger to Richard. We're being slaughtered. Give us the order to charge. Richard's response, wait. Another hour. Another 1,000 arrows. More knights die. Garnier sends another messenger. My lord, we cannot endure this. We must charge or retreat. Richard, hold your position. Here's what's happening. Richard is waiting for Saladin to commit everything. Light cavalry is useless in a melee against heavy knights, but only if the knights can actually reach them. If Richard's cavalry charges while Saladin's forces are dispersed and mobile, the Muslim forces will just scatter, then surround and destroy the knights with arrows. But if Richard waits until Saladin's entire army is concentrated, close, and committed to the attack, then a cavalry charge becomes a meat grinder. Richard needs Saladin overconfident. He needs the Muslim forces close enough that they can't retreat. He needs them to believe victory is seconds away. So he lets his men die. Slowly. Publicly. For hours. Until finally, at 1 p.m., the Hospitallers break. 2 Hospitaller knights, their names lost to history, have watched their brothers die all morning. They've listened to Richard's orders. They've held formation. And they're done. They lower their lances. They spur their horses. They charge. Within seconds, the entire Hospitaller squadron follows. Then the French knights. Then half the Templar vanguard. Richard's carefully orchestrated formation disintegrates in less than 30 seconds. This is the moment Saladin has been waiting for. Disorganized cavalry charging into concentrated infantry? It's a massacre. His horse archers will scatter, the knights will lose momentum, and then 30,000 warriors will surround and annihilate them. Except Richard does something Saladin doesn't expect. Instead of trying to recall the charging knights, which is impossible, Richard commits everything. He raises his arm. 6 trumpets sound across the column. The signal every man has been waiting 2 weeks to hear. The remaining 2,000 knights explode forward in perfect formation. The infantry doesn't retreat, they open corridors in their shield wall, creating channels for the cavalry to pass through, then close ranks behind them to prevent Muslim forces from following. The coordination is flawless. The timing is perfect. And the impact is apocalyptic. Here's what a full-strength medieval cavalry charge actually looks like. A warhorse in full armor weighs 1,500 pounds. Add a 200-pound knight in 80 pounds of armor. That's 1,780 pounds moving at 30 miles per hour. The kinetic energy on impact is approximately 400,000 joules, roughly equivalent to a modern car crash. Now multiply that by 2,000 horses hitting simultaneously. The Ayyubid front line doesn't break. It vaporizes. Turkish horse archers, wearing leather armor, sitting on unarmored horses, are simply obliterated. Lances punch through bodies. Warhorses trample anything that survives the initial impact. The first 3 ranks of Saladin's army cease to exist in under 60 seconds. But Richard doesn't let the charge continue. After 5 minutes, he sounds recall. Because Saladin's cavalry is already moving to encircle the flanks. If the Crusader knights continue charging, they'll penetrate deep into enemy lines, lose cohesion, and get surrounded. So Richard pulls them back, reforms the line, and waits for Saladin's next move. Saladin commits his reserves. 10,000 Mamluk heavy cavalry and 5,000 Bedouin horsemen sweep toward the Crusader flanks, attempting a double envelopment. Richard waits until they're committed, too close to retreat, moving too fast to change direction, then launches the second wave. This time the knights angle their charge, smashing into the Mamluk cavalry before the encirclement completes. The impact shatters the Muslim left flank. Again, Richard recalls before the knights overextend. Saladin is now facing a problem he's never encountered, an opponent with the discipline to control cavalry during battle. Usually, once knights charge, they're uncontrollable. They chase glory and kills until they're isolated and surrounded. But Richard is using his cavalry like a surgeon's blade. Strike, withdraw, strike again. At 1:14 p.m., 14 minutes after the first charge, Richard launches the third and final assault directly at Saladin's command position. This is psychological warfare. If Saladin's personal guard has to defend him, the entire army knows their commander is in danger. Morale collapses. The Ayyubid line breaks. 7,000 warriors die in the rout. The rest flee into the forest of Arsuf. And Richard, against every medieval military tradition, orders his knights not to pursue. Here's what makes Arsuf remarkable. Richard sacrificed thousands of potential kills to preserve strategic integrity. Medieval warfare doctrine says you pursue routed enemies because that's when you inflict 90% of casualties. But Richard understood something most commanders didn't. Exhausted cavalry pursuing scattered enemies into a forest is vulnerable cavalry. If Saladin regrouped and counterattacked, scattered Crusader knights would be slaughtered. So Richard gave up the pursuit, maintained formation, and marched the final 6 miles to Jaffa unopposed. The butcher's bill, 7,000 Ayyubid dead, 700 Crusader casualties. But the real victory wasn't the kill ratio. It was psychological. For 4 years, Saladin had been untouchable. Muslim chroniclers called him the Sword of Islam. After Hattin, Crusader armies were terrified of him. And then Richard, outnumbered, exhausted, ambushed, dismantled his army in 17 minutes. The Battle of Arsuf didn't recapture Jerusalem. Richard would spend another year fighting Saladin to a stalemate, eventually signing the Treaty of Jaffa that left Jerusalem in Muslim hands. But Arsuf accomplished something more important. It proved Saladin could be beaten. It shattered Muslim morale. and it established Richard as the most dangerous military commander in the medieval world. Muslim mothers would threaten misbehaving children for 2 centuries afterward. Behave or Malik Rik will come for you. Here's the truth about Arsuf that modern historians won't tell you. This battle wasn't about religion. It wasn't about courage. It wasn't about who God favored. It was about a commander who understood 3 principles better than anyone alive. 1. Control the timing, control the battle. Saladin wanted the Crusaders to charge early. Richard forced him to commit first, then struck when retreat was impossible. 2. Psychology defeats numbers. Richard didn't win because he had better soldiers. He won because he broke Saladin's morale at the exact moment the Muslim army believed victory was certain. 3. Discipline is the ultimate weapon. The Crusaders should have died when the Hospitallers broke formation. But Richard turned chaos into victory by committing everything at once, maintaining coordination under impossible pressure. Medieval warfare wasn't about mindless violence. It was chess played with human lives. And on September 7, 1191, Richard the Lionheart executed a strategy so perfect that military historians still study it today. 17 minutes. 3 charges. 7,000 enemy dead. And the reason this story isn't taught in schools? Because it doesn't fit the narrative. Modern academia wants the Crusades to be religious fanaticism producing meaningless slaughter. But Arsuf was different. Arsuf was tactical genius. That's what the chronicles hide. That's what Saladin's chroniclers tried to obscure. That's what you were never supposed to know. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more historical battles and tactics. Until next time.